Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. That new music that you are hearing right now comes to us via friend of the show, one of my favorite composers in the entire games industry, the man behind the music of games like Sonic Mania and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, T. Lopes. Big shout out and massive thanks to him for lending his expertise to help usher in this new independent era of all things Nintendo. Pretty soon we will be joined by Klein of the Direct.com and host of both the Reckless Rebellion and Controller Club podcasts. But I kind of enjoyed having the opportunity to start recent shows just talking straight to you. So that's what we're going to do this time as well. No idea if that's going to be the way forward from now on, or maybe I'll just do that when I have something specific to say, but here we are, so let's chat. First of all, I mentioned this on social media and in the All Things Nintendo channel of the Game Informer Discord server, but I want to plug that I started a Patreon for All Things Nintendo. And before you groan, I want to make sure that you know that All Things Nintendo will continue to be as free as it ever was. In fact, the only thing that the Patreon has right now, it is existing 100% free right now. There's no way to even pay money right now. All the posts are public and open to everyone. Its main purpose as of right now is to just give listeners of the show a place to congregate that isn't the Discord channel. I've talked to my coworkers at Game Informer. We are keeping that Discord channel active within the Game Informer server. After all, I'm still an employee at Game Informer. A lot of people found the show through Game Informer. But on top of being a place that listeners of the show can congregate, if you don't want to email in questions for this podcast, I'm putting posts on the Patreon to ask for questions, suggestions, segment ideas, topics, all kinds of things. I mentioned last week that I wanted to have this new era of all things Nintendo be more interactive. And that, as well as emailing me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com, are the best ways to take part in that. And that brings me to my next point. With this now falling entirely on me, I'm just going to ask for some support. And again, not asking for money right now. Instead, I'm just asking you to leave a review. 5-star reviews really help podcasts grow. If you've never had a podcast before, you would be surprised how much reviews help a show grow. So if you would be so kind as to do that, I would really appreciate it. And now, probably when I bring up that I started a Patreon page, people probably immediately jump to all right, well, when are we going to be asked to pay for something? And yes, if things continue to go well and folks continue to support me, I have thought out what I would like to do with paid tiers. But again, it would not be locking out anything that you're already getting for free behind a paywall. Instead, I was thinking about additional shows each week on a few other topics that I'm passionate about. But we will cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, just joining the free Patreon is another way to support the show and also be notified of stuff related to the show. And I actually did get some questions, and I know that I said that I wanted this to be a very interactive show going forward, but we have a jam-packed episode. So let me just answer one here, I guess, and then we'll save the others for future episodes. So this one comes from Elena R. on the Patreon page. They ask, out of pure curiosity, as I'm still playing Tears of the Kingdom almost a year later and can't imagine finishing in the time it would take to do this, I would love to hear more about what it takes to review a game, how you fit in the play with your other responsibilities, what you're watching for along the way, and how you wrap the whole thing up with a bow. So, man, that's a big topic. So when you review a game, we typically get a code a few weeks, I guess it could be a few weeks, could be a few days ahead of the launch or the review embargo. And then, from there, it's kind of just off to the races. And we usually do have to kind of put other responsibilities aside, especially if it's a huge game like like a Tears of the Kingdom, for example. We wanted to put such an emphasis on that game that I wasn't even the reviewer, but I was handling some other stuff. I did a feature article. I interviewed Eiji Aonuma and Hidemaru Fujibayashi. It was kind of like an all-out blitz for both me and my colleague Kyle Hilliard at Game Informer. So that was kind of the approach we took with a giant game like that. And then we had video footage that we did for a video review and everything. But as far as what we kind of do in terms of like our other priorities, the way that I personally try to do it is I will start playing it after the first 2 hours of the work day. And it can be challenging because I have a lot of hats that I wear at Game Informer. So when a review comes in that really is going to be time intensive, I will try to play every waking moment that I can. Persona 3 Reload is a great example of that. Like, I think I put about anywhere between 8 to 12 hours a day once that came in. Same thing for Persona 5 Royal before that. Tears of the Kingdom was kind of the same way, where I would come in, I would start my work day, I would get as much of my responsibilities taken care of in those first 2 hours. And, sometimes there would be some bleed over, and then I would go and just sit in front of my TV, and I would just have kind of like the communication channels open. So if somebody needed something, I could pause, come back over to my computer where I'm recording this podcast right now, and take care of responsibilities. But really, it's just kind of an all out sprint, especially when it's one of those flagship releases. We would have some people like when Dan Tack, when he was with Game Informer and like Elden Ring came in, he knew that was going to be a lot of gameplay that he would need to take care of. And not only that, but it's going to be challenging. So he would just kind of, a lot of times he would come in and like when a From Software game would arrive, he would just kind of be like, all right, taking care of what I need to take care of in the morning. And then, this is back when we were still going into an office. He would go back to his apartment and be completely just consumed by the game. And I think that's kind of the way that a lot of us have done it. And for those bigger games, we do typically have to play after hours, which is unfortunate given how intensive it can be. But that's just kind of like the name of the game. And especially when those games stretch out to be 60 hours, 80 hours, or in the case of Persona 3 Reload, I think I put somewhere between 85 and 100 hours into that game. So it did end up being quite a sprint, but also a marathon at the same time. So that's kind of the procedure that we take. As far as what you're watching for along the way, a lot of it is just kind of like, how do I feel about this? Like, what does the flow feel like? Like, and it's interesting because like a lot of people will say like, oh well, you guys scored this game higher than this one, how can that be? And it often comes down to different reviewers will have different tastes. For example, like I absolutely loved Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's my favorite game of this year so far. And our reviewer Wes, you've heard him on the show a million times, he liked it a lot as well. Like, he loves that game. Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of his favorite games of all time, he told me. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, he just has a little bit less tolerance for open worlds such as Rebirths. And meanwhile, on my side, I love open worlds such as Rebirths. So it really is kind of like, even though I say that I like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth more than more than Persona 3 Reload, if you go to GameInformer.com, Persona 3 Reload has a higher review score. But that's just indicative of different reviewers. And that's, I think, a thing that a lot of people fall into the trap. What we're watching for along the way, it's how the game feels in action, looking at other critical elements. But like, really, it's a lot of like, how is this game coming together? Like, how do the disparate elements of this game come together? And of course, we critique the different elements. Like, if one mode is really bad or this one mode's really good, ultimately is this game, it's like, because games can be greater than the sum of their parts, right? Like, god, like, I'm trying to think of like a good example of that, but like, certain parts of a game might not be the best. Like, there are parts of Breath of the Wild that I absolutely don't think are amazing, but it comes together in a way that is greater than the sum of its parts, where it ends up being my favorite game of all time. So while you do have to be critical about those parts, I think that ultimately the overall experience. Like maybe the story of a game isn't the best. Maybe there's parts of the gameplay that don't really come together, but judging it as a whole is something that's really important. And then how do you wrap the whole thing up with a bow is the final part of Elena's question here. And that's a tough one. Once you finish the game and like see all that you need to see and feel confident in your feelings, just getting it down on paper is so daunting at times because I mean, as somebody who's written, I just wrote my 10th cover story. Looking at a blank Word document, knowing that you have to put it together and create a cohesive sounding article out of that blank Word document can be really daunting. And especially when it's a game that you have a lot of differing thoughts on. Like, for example, like a game that you maybe really loved, but there are some problems with that game. Like that can be challenging to know where to start. And it's interesting because like games that you absolutely love and games that you absolutely dislike are usually the easier reviews to write. The ones that are hard are the ones where you're just kind of like lukewarm on. So that that's kind of the challenge is wrapping it all up in a bow, like getting your thoughts joined together and putting it down in a cohesive way. I kind of like to always start with talking about gameplay because I think ultimately for the vast majority of games, that is how people will mostly interact with the game and how they will feel, I guess, the impact of the how the game is created. But sometimes it makes sense to start with story. Like if it's a narrative focused game, like talking about story is also not a bad idea, or talking about some modes that are really impactful. And I think that that's a key thing for how Game Informer approaches reviews is we really try to like hammer on the things that are most impactful in our experiences. And you know, speaking of wrapping things up in a bow, I'll end with this, that like getting your thoughts down is one thing, and that's really important in terms of like crafting an outline, having an outline there so you can at least have something to work off of. And if you have a problem writing an intro or a conclusion, then save that for later. And I think that that has been the biggest piece of advice that I have. And then like ultimately, like your draft is not about getting it right, it's about getting it down. It's about making it so that you have your thoughts down and then you hone it from there. And you know, luckily at Game Informer we have several amazing editors who, if we're struggling with something, we can say, hey, take a look at this paragraph and let me know what you think, and they can give you some suggestions. And that's what I really love about our team that we have and our process that we have. But I hope I didn't ramble too much and I gave you an actual cohesive answer about how we provide cohesive reviews. But yeah, it's a challenging subject. And that was the thing that actually, when I joined Game Informer, it was the toughest part for me. And now here we are, I'm in charge of our reviews department. So it's an interesting topic. It's one that I enjoy talking about. So thank you so much for the question, Elena. Again, if you would like to get any questions in for future episodes, you can hit me up on Patreon or email me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. We are going to take our first break, and when we get back, we'll be joined by this week's guest, and we'll dive right into this week's news. We will be right back. We are back, and I am now joined by senior editor of TheDirect.com and host of the Reckless Rebellion podcast and the Controller Club podcast, Klein Felt. Klein, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brian. I'm happy to be here. It's, I guess, your first independent show. I get the debut show here.
You do. Yeah, it's also the first show. Maybe I'm cursing myself here. After numerous video difficulties, we're trying the video again. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it was a success. If you're listening to it and you Google it and there's no YouTube video version, then you know what happened. So, Klein, before we get into the news and talk a little bit about you and your history with everything, we have a time-honored tradition here at All Things Nintendo. It is called First Nintendo Game, Favorite Nintendo Game, whenever somebody makes their debut appearance, we get to know them a little bit through the lens of their history with Nintendo. So, first part of that question, what was kind of your first memory, first impactful moment, first game, anything along those lines with Nintendo?
Well, I mean, as far back as video games for me go, Nintendo goes, like it's coming home from school, seeing the Nintendo Power in the mailbox every week, like or every month. That was a very special time. But
What's your
um,
favorite Nintendo Power cover?
oh man, this might play into what I talk about a little bit later. But the Mario Galaxy cover
Oh
story they
yeah.
had when they did that with Mario on the front spinning around. I also had a friend, a family friend, give me some like backdated ones after I had started subscribing. And one of them was and I held this thing dear and I don't have it anymore, but it was the preview issue for the GameCube.
Ooh.
And it had everything in there, like all the Smash Brothers Melee details. I'm wearing a Melee shirt right now.
Oh wow, I didn't even see
Um,
that until now.
Luigi's Mansion. It had all like it was just such a cool little thing. And in like I was in grade school, would sit in the living room and just pore over these magazines. But my first game, it goes back to the off-colored old Game Boy that my parents had from before I was born. I'm a youngin. The Game Boy Advance and GameCube were the first consoles that were mine. But we had the brick Game Boy, and it was Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins.
Classic.
That was the first Nintendo game that I played. I was so young that I barely even really remember it. But I do remember it making such a big impact on me. It was that and Paperboy, and then I notably lost the Game Boy
What?
at a very young age. I know I was grounded. It was a whole
Oh
thing. If I
no.
brought it up in the family, there would still be bitter, there would still be angry words exchanged, I'm sure. Um, but yeah, it was definitely yes, Mario Land 2. And then I got the Game Boy Advance, and I remember getting was it this first, it was Super Mario Brothers 2, but it was the first Super Mario Advance series
Yes.
with the Game Boy. And it was the purple translucent Game Boy Advance. And oh man, me and that thing spent many hours in the back of the car.
Yeah, I still remember the first time that I saw a Game Boy Advance. I was over at a neighbor's house, and there was this one family that got all the video games. They had like, if people are watching the video version, if such a thing exists, you can see that I have arcade cabinets in the background, and that is pretty much inspiration from the neighbors that I had growing up, where they had arcade machines, they had pinball machines, they had skee ball, but they also owned all the consoles. So, like, I remember launch day of the Game Boy Advance, launch day of the Dreamcast, going over to their house and like seeing like, is this thing
Wow.
really that cool? And I remember like getting my hands on that purple translucent Game Boy Advance, and it was Super Mario Advance, aka Super Mario Brothers 2, and being like, "Oh, that's really cool. Like this looks like a Super Nintendo game because, you know, they kind of use like the upscaled graphics of Mario All-Stars for like the basis of it, but you know, they also added other improvements." And just being blown away by that. So yeah, that's a great introduction into video games and you know, more specifically Nintendo. So that transitions us to the next part of the question, which is more obvious. Favorite Nintendo game. What is your favorite Nintendo game of all time?
This was hard. I don't know if it's recency bias talking, but like the thing that first just like came to mind was Tears of the Kingdom from
Mm,
last year. Like, I think further away I get from that game, the more special I realize it was. And even in the moment, I knew as I was playing, I'm like, I have never had a video game experience quite like this one. And I haven't gone back since I finished it. Like that, I really binged that thing through the month of May and into June last year. And then finally, when I had done enough, I didn't 100% it. There are still shrines out there that I could still do. There's
probably some
no way
Koroks.
there's no way I'm going to get the Korok seeds. I'm not a madman. But finishing like that game, that final kind of hour is something I will never forget. I've been a Zelda fan for a long time, but there are few video game moments that I have had that final kind of Ganon fight and the Skyfall and stuff like that. If it isn't that, I'm gonna shout out Mario Galaxy. I think
Mm.
Mario Galaxy is my favorite 3D Mario. Mario's my favorite franchise. So it's my favorite game and my favorite franchise. And I just think like specifically the music in that game is just chef's kiss. 11 out of 10, like so good. When they moved to orchestra for that, which was a big
Mm.
deal. And I can remember leading into that game being so excited that it was going to be, oh, like real instruments, this is so cool. And then getting there and just hearing like Gusty Garden Galaxy for the first time and like getting chills down my spine.
Yeah, Mario Galaxy, an all-time great. I have always kind of been of the theory that like there are a few franchises where the first one that you play is really hard to dethrone as your favorite, right? Like as far as like Zelda games, for the longest time for me, it was Ocarina of Time. The first one that I ever played was actually the original Legend of Zelda on NES. And then I played A Link to the Past and everything. But like Ocarina of Time being the first 3D Zelda game, it like, established such a foundation for really the next 20 years of Zelda games. And I was like, well, I'm never going to get that sense of wonder that I had again. And then Breath of the Wild came along, and it was like, oh, wow, it really did take something pretty freaking special to dethrone that. And then it was the same feeling with Super Mario 64. Like, I was like, oh, well, this is going to be my favorite 3D Mario game forever. There's nothing that's going to top that. And then Mario Odyssey kind of like, did something really cool there. So, where was Mario Galaxy in terms of like your favorite or your like lineage of playing at least 3D Mario?
So 3D Mario I had on my GameCube, on my black GameCube in the basement was we had Super Mario Sunshine, and I did not beat it until I was much older. I was young when we had the GameCube, but that was my first experience with 3D Mario. But I was in love with Mario leading into Galaxy because of my Game Boy,
Mm-hmm.
because I had Super Mario Advance, which was Super Mario Brothers 2, and that was my introduction. It's funny that that was my introduction to Mario as a character, because it is like, I mean, notably isn't really technically a Mario game. Like,
Yeah.
but then I got, I think, Super Mario Advance 4, which was Super Mario Brothers 3, and
So
that
not a
was
confusing title at all.
not at all. And I poured over that thing. I like that for me was Mario. And on the GameCube, we had all the Mario spin-offs, whether it was Double Dash, whether it was Mario Party 5. Like I'd played Mario Party before I had played a 3D Mario game.
Mm.
Um but I just loved those characters, and then I got introduced to platforming, and that was it. Like, it was, by then it was too late. I remember Galaxy was a Christmas present, if I'm not mistaken, and I can remember opening that thing a couple years into the Wii's life cycle and just like, okay, see everyone later. I'm going to be downstairs playing Mario Galaxy until my eyes are burning.
So do you remember the fun fact about Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3 in terms of like why a lot of people consider that the best version of Super Mario Brothers 3?
No, is it because it has like those, it's got bonus levels in it, those
Yeah,
e-reader
so
levels
the
that people
e-reader
love?
levels, which have been almost impossible to play if you have the Game Boy Advance version, because like those e-readers and the e-reader cards themselves are really hard to come by now. However, on the Wii U Virtual Console and then more recently on the Switch Online expansion pack Game Boy Advance library, you can access those e-reader levels natively. So if you haven't done so, highly recommend you go and do that, especially if you missed the e-reader levels the first time around, because you know Mario 3, one of the greatest platforming games of all time, and this gives you more levels designed by Nintendo. It's not like Mario Maker where it's like, okay, some of these are amazing, some of these are awful. It's like, no, these are additional levels, like director's cut levels, basically, from one of the best platforming games of all time. So very cool stuff there. So thank you so much for sharing with me your history with Nintendo. Before we get started with the news, I have to say, I'm a big fan of the Direct. It's one of my favorite websites. It has one of my favorite podcasts, which you appear on occasionally, on top of all your other podcasts. But for the uninitiated, can you tell me about how you got involved with the Direct and then kind of give us a scoop on Reckless Rebellion and Controller Club?
Yeah, for sure. So we at the Direct, if you don't know, we are a, I guess I'll say, fandom-based entertainment site. We cover all the universes you love, whether it's DC, Star Wars, Marvel, video games, and we have branched out to so much more now. I spent today writing about the new Ripley show on Netflix and a whole bunch of things coming out in the entertainment world. And I got started there, oh my gosh, it's coming up on 4 years ago, which is absolutely crazy to hear out
Wow.
loud. But it was during the pandemic. I have a background in radio broadcasting. I was doing that job, and I was kind of working behind the scenes at that time. And it was thin. I was working more in like events and prizing, I'll say. And when things started to shut down, the first things that started to disappear was that. And so I was doing work, but it was not a lot of work. And so I thought, oh, I'll see what else is out there. And I had actually been a fan of the Direct for quite some time at that point, when they had just the Facebook and Twitter pages, and then they launched a website. And at that point, they were kind of expanding into games. And so I'm like, I'll put my name forward. I'll never hear anything. I had English teachers ask if English was my first language back in high school. There's no way they're going to take me on as a writer. And then started part-time doing that, and now it's my full-time gig. I work there basically as a full-time freelancer, editing and writing every single day. And it's a lot of fun podcasting when I can, on the Direct podcast. And then, as you said, I have two podcasts of my own: Reckless Rebellion, which is a Star Wars podcast. If you are out there and like the galaxy far, far away, you can check that out. We are everywhere, wherever you're listening to this right now, you can look at it. And then Controller Club, which is kind of my little baby. It's me, my friend Tom, my friend Lauren, who both work at thedirect.com. We are three video game fans from three different continents is our
Oh,
selling
wow.
pitch, because it is a Australian, a Canadian, and an Englishman all on one podcast together. There is an hour a week that the time zones line up, and we make it work. So that's Controller Club. Wherever you're listening, please go say hello. It is our passion project. We put out, we work really hard on the content, I'll say, and we try, and we are trying to build this kind of community. And I think we put out a really good podcast. We're coming up on episode 100. And
Oh,
so
congratulations.
yeah, so if you like what you hear today, it's just a tease of what we have over there. So it's I'm really proud of what we've built with Controller Club specifically. It's my little baby.
Yeah, I mean, we actually will be talking a little bit about just some mentions of Star Wars later on in the show. But you know, direct.com, I go there all the time for basically all my superhero news at this point. You know, it's one of my favorite accounts to follow on Twitter. It's just, it's comprehensive in its coverage, right? Like it's just like it really is everything you need to know about the universes you love. Like it's a great tagline for the website and the podcast for that matter. Like it really is like whenever that hits my podcast feed, or whenever like I'm on Twitter and I see it, I'm like, well, let me see what they have to say, because I am a massive like superhero movies, TV shows, comic books in general as well. Like it's been a while since I've actually sat down and read through some comic books, but like, the movies and the TV shows, I can't help but see everything except, Madam Web and Morbius. I kind of skip those because who
I think a lot of people
cares?
did.
But All Things Nintendo, in fact, is not a superhero podcast. But you know what goes hand in hand with one another? X-Men and video games. And X-Men 97, it's been rolling out over Disney Plus over the last few weeks. Are you all caught up?
I am all caught up. I am caught up. It's been very fun so far.
I'm loving it. I grew up on that X-Men. I mean, the X-Men comics, the X-Men arcade game, and the original X-Men animated series. We'll avoid spoilers for those who are not caught up. But this week's episode, at least half of the episode, is called Motendo and features a game console called the Motendo, which actually looks like a Sega Genesis for some reason. But Jubilee and Roberto, who again we won't spoil who Roberto is, but they get sucked into the video game and have to take part in an in-show video game that kind of looks like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge style homage to that X-Men arcade game that everybody loves so much. Like it's kind of modernized pixel art, but it's still very much that pixel aesthetic. And I don't know about you, but ever since Shredder's Revenge came out, I have been wanting the developer behind that game, Tribute Games, to do a Marvel brawler in that same vein. And this episode only intensified those feelings.
Yeah,
Like
for
it
sure.
was it was like nostalgia central, and like even some of the scenes that they show are like playing off nostalgia. But how did this episode hit you as somebody who also loves video games?
I thought it was really charming. I mean, everything in this show so far has been exactly that, incredibly charming. You can tell that the people creating it, the people working on it, really, really had their hearts in it.
Mhm.
There's so many special little nods, and this was just one of them. I mean, the X-Men isn't just, as you said, isn't just a movie and TV franchise of that era, especially. The video games mean a lot. And so I'm a little younger, so I was not there for the arcades. I was not there for the X-Men brawlers, but I do know the history. I do know it well. And so seeing that kind of nod was really cool, and
Mhm.
hearing this great chip tune remixes of songs they have in there, and as you said, the stylized like pixel look is really cool. It did make me want, as you said, it makes me want to play a modern brawler like that. Like, I've loved getting to re-experience these kind of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games that when have they've remastered them, and then Shredder's Revenge.
Mhm.
I would love to have them take on X-Men.
Yeah, I mean, I would love X-Men, like, just because of the nostalgia factor, but I mentioned this on last week's show because there was actually a quote that emerged from the developer that was like, "Oh, yeah, we'd love to do more DLC or more, like, a sequel to Shredder's Revenge, but, we'll have to see how the fan reception and how, like, the sales are and everything." However, like, maybe there's some other licensees that are hitting us up, and maybe we'll do something there. Like, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, because I can't remember the exact quote, but that had me saying, like, as much as I would love like an X-Men brawler, like expanding it out to the entire Marvel roster and like, be able to choose Wolverine and Jubilee and like Colossus and everything for nostalgia purposes, but like let us pick Iron Man and Cap and Thor and just the entire suite and have you fight through these levels and take on like the greatest villains in Marvel history. Like that would be an incredible experience, and like I would eat that up. Like maybe even more than the TMNT game.
For sure. And I think that there's no better time than right now, for Marvel games to do something like this. They're taking some stabs at a few different things. I mean, we just got Marvel's Midnight Suns a year ago, which is
Mhm.
like, that is a different game that maybe the Marvel video game side of things wouldn't have done 5 or 6 years ago. And if someone were to come to them with a pitch, they would listen to it. I think they would hear it out. And I would not be surprised if we actually did see something like this come from all of this nostalgia that people are having.
So do you play any of the Marvel mobile games? I feel like they have like two sectors, right? There's the console experiences like the Spider-Man and Midnight Suns and everything like that. And then they definitely devote a ton of attention to the mobile sector. I'm helplessly hooked on Marvel Strike Force, have been for its entire existence, and then I'm a daily player of Marvel Snap. But like, are there any that you kind of keep up with?
I have dipped in and out of things through the years. I was big for a while on Puzzle Quest, Marvel
Oh,
Puzzle
really?
Quest, that yeah, like 5 or 6 years ago. But I loved Marvel Snap when it first arrived. I thought I'm a huge Magic the Gathering player. I
Oh,
love these kind of deck based card games, whether it be in physical form or playing games like Slay the Spire on my Switch or PlayStation or computer. But I have not played a ton of the. There's a lot of them. I've not played a ton of the other ones, like Strike Force. I know is huge, but and I haven't even dipped into Marvel Snap in quite a long time. It's been probably about a year. When it first launched, though, I was into that game.
yeah. It's Marvel Snap, Marvel Strike Force. Those are the two that just completely have consumed my time. But have you played like Ultimate Alliance or anything like that?
Back in the day, I can remember playing Ultimate Alliance on a friend's PlayStation 2. I was I was not in the right place, I guess, financially, to pick up Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3 when it came out a few years ago. And I was really looking forward to it. I was right out of college, didn't have a lot of money for games and that kind of thing. I would love another one because I know that game, the people that liked it really liked it. The third one specifically, I forget who developed that game. It was a studio that was
Oh
it.
my
It
god.
wasn't Platinum, was it? No, no. It's
Mm,
someone. Team Ninja.
that's what I was thinking,
I
but
think it's Team Ninja,
we did a
which
cover
is
story on
wild.
it.
Um,
It is Team Ninja.
And so
You
I think people are craving that experience. They took, was it Marvel Heroes away a few years ago, which is that like Marvel
Yeah.
Diablo like on consoles.
Developed by the
And
creator of Diablo,
yeah,
David
so
Brevik, yeah.
I think that people are like, they like that action RPG experience with superheroes, and Ultimate Alliance kind of gives them that. It fills that void for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another one of those soon enough. Um,
It's been
Maybe this
5
time,
years.
don't make it a Switch exclusive. I think that did kind of limit the player base a little bit, because I know this is a Nintendo podcast, but there are a lot of people playing everywhere. And
Oh, of course.
when it comes to Marvel, especially, it's like, let everyone play the games. It's one of the most mass appeal brands in the world.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, like, I'm surprised it never came to other platforms. Like, I know Nintendo was instrumental in getting it made, and I think that they
Yeah.
were, like, hand-in-hand partners with Marvel Games to get that game made, but I'm shocked that, like, it wasn't, like, a maybe even just, like, a 2 or 3-year exclusive. So, I don't know, maybe it didn't light the world on fire as much as they had
I
hoped.
don't think it did. I know the people who played it really loved it, but I don't think sales wise, I don't know if it did the numbers that they may have thought it was going to.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate because those types of games are great. Like I love seeing all the heroes come together and everything. I mean, that's the big appeal for me for these like Marvel Strike Force, where it's like, oh, cool, they just added leader to it, and I'm like, oh, that's neat to see the leader in a game. You don't really you don't get to see him very often in video games. But going back to the X-Men episode, if you want to see the episode for yourself, you can watch it on Disney Plus. But if you don't want to go onto Disney Plus or you don't have an account, the Marvel Studios Twitter account also shared a clip of the video game scene if you just want to check it out and see what it's all about. So that is something that you can do if that conversation piqued your curiosity. But Klein, are you a Hollow Knight fan?
I I would like to be a Hollow Knight fan. Every time I try Hollow Knight, I'm like, I'm just not good. I'm just not good at games, I guess. Like I
It's
can't do
tough.
it.
It is really tough. And you know, I never have finished it. I've made decent progress,
Same here.
but it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like I have a hard time, like, unless like a game really sinks its hooks into me, like pushing through like an encounter that requires me to play like 20 times or something like that. Like that's why I ultimately fell off something like Elden Ring. I was just like, man, I'm not feeling like my time is being respected right now, and I have way too many games to play. So as much as I enjoyed Elden Ring, as much as I enjoyed Hollow Knight, I did eventually fall off of both of those games. But we've been waiting for Hollow Knight Silksong for more than 5 years now. And it was originally planned as DLC for the original Hollow Knight, but according to the developers, it became obvious to them that the scope was worthy of its own game, and it was like way, way past that of a piece of DLC. And I guess that's true because, you know, it's been more than 5 years since it was announced and it's still not out. Which means we've known about Hollow Knight Silksong longer than COVID has existed. Just to put it into perspective there. Like, as long as this pandemic has been going on, Hollow Knight Silksong has been announced for more than a year longer than that. And then 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, at Summer Game Fest 2022, Xbox had a presentation about games coming to Game Pass within the next year, and Hollow Knight Silksong was on that. And people were like, "Oh, does this mean that Hollow Knight Silksong's coming out within the next year?" And they're like, "As we said, everything on this is coming out in the next year." And everybody's like, "Oh my god, it's coming out before summer 2023." And then that came and went without happening. But we may have signs of life as of this week. So a listing for Hollow Knight Silksong has popped up on the Xbox storefront. And for context, it was already on the Switch, PlayStation, and Steam storefronts. But the fact that we have a new listing may mean something is happening soon. And then also of note, it recently received a rating for age appropriateness in Korea, which can sometimes mean a release is imminent. So, Klein, am I grasping at straws here? Am I putting on too much of a tinfoil hat?
I would usually say no. I would usually say that, yeah, usually when there's smoke, there is fire. But the thing is with Hollow Knight Silksong is we've been burned so many times. I know my Controller Club co-host Tom Drew is a huge Hollow Knight fan, and this is a running joke on the show that this game is just never actually going to come out. So I would like to say yes. I would like to say that, sure, there's signs of life. Maybe this is happening. I have no idea with this game because it has been so long. In all seriousness, though, with the store page did ironically go up on April 1st. So I did see some people poking fun at that, going, they know what they're doing. But that and the rating, it's got to come at some point. They haven't just been sitting on their hands this whole time. Like this, they've been working on something. So it's going to come out. I bet it will be soon. It'll probably, I would suspect, like if I had to put a date on it, probably say like sometime this summer. This feels like a perfect like July game would be awesome. Just right in the middle of summer. I know that that's kind of when people thought it was going to come out last year.
Mm-hmm.
So just do that, put it out. It's going to be quite funny when it does come out, because it's just this, almost, we're getting close to like Last Guardian territory, or
Mythical status.
yes, like it's this unicorn game that I will not believe is actually there until people are playing it.
Could you imagine the internet meltdown on a live stream like chat if they shadow drop it? Like we're watching like
Oh,
the
I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
yeah.
If we got a direct in the next 2 months, say it's around that June time, like Summer Games Fest, like we usually get,
Mm-hmm.
I would not be surprised if it's a, hey, and here it is right now. It's been so long that they could do that with this game.
They really could. And I think that people would lose their minds. And I think that's almost the way they have to do it at this point. Like if they are like, hey, we have a release date, it's coming out, October 13th. Everybody'd be like, yeah, okay, we'll believe it when we see it. Like this, we've heard that this game is coming before a date before, and it's we're here 5 years later and it's still not out. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be one of those games that people are going to absolutely lose their minds. And I hope that it's not a victim of its own hype. Like we've seen some of these games that just take forever to come out. And I hope it's not one of those games also that like maybe is overdeveloped and this long development period. And it might not even be that long of a development period. It's just that we got it announced way too early in the cycle. I hope it's not one of those where it's like, it's indicative of problems with development. But they put out an amazing product with the first Hollow Knight, and I have full faith in them to put out another amazing release. It's just like, okay, well, maybe they're concerned about following up such a great release with the first game with another game that's maybe falling short in other areas. But I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. Like it's tricky because like they had such a big hit with this one that this one is like, I can't even imagine the weight of expectations on their shoulders.
For sure. It'll be like the to compare it to something, it'll probably be the level of hype of like Larian's next game at this point, or Elden Ring 2 or something like that, where like it is just, even GTA 6, like GTA 6 is I think the only game like that, but it's, yeah, as you said, really, or it has reached this mythological status amongst fans. And I don't know, I hope it delivers, because Team Cherry the first time around did a great job with Hollow Knight, but I don't know if if anything can live up to what people have in their heads at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But if anybody listening to this podcast hasn't checked out the original Hollow Knight and you like challenging Metroidvanias, I'd recommend checking it out. It's available on Switch and every other major platform. So go check that out. And Klein, I know you're a Zelda fan. I know you're a Tears of the Kingdom lover, such as myself. I am reading this over on NintendoLife.com, but Uniqlo has announced a line of T-shirts featuring Tears of the Kingdom. Have you seen these?
I saw them come across my feed today. I think I saw them actually from Game Informer. So
Yes, I passed that along to our news people as soon as I saw it. I'm like, oh my god, look at this. So yeah, like, what do you think about these designs?
I think they're not my favorite actually when it comes to Uniqlo branded stuff. The Uniqlo partnerships when it comes to games have been great over the last couple of years. They just did a Capcom release
Mm-hmm.
that looks great with Street Fighter designs, and I'm a huge Mega Man fan, and they did some good Mega Man designs there. They've done Tekken stuff. The Metal Gear collection from a few years ago, I notably have not played, other than Metal Gear Solid 5, have not like gone deep on the Metal Gear games.
Oh, same.
I need to, because I know I would love them. I love Kojima. I have it. I have a Kojima Productions t-shirt. Like I just love everything about him. I love the whole auteur vibe.
Mm-hmm.
But they did a great collaboration with Metal Gear a couple of years ago as well. And these ones were kind of underwhelming. I was just kind of like, I feel like you could have done something a little bit more creative. There's I think one design where it's Zelda reaching out to Link and it says like let me grant you this power or something like that. And then a couple of the
It's
other
the scene where
ones,
she's falling off the
yes,
ledge and into the pit.
yeah. And then a couple of the other ones is okay, that's Link and the champions, but I don't know, like give me him ripping the like master sword out of something. Or if you're going to do a Zelda collaboration, I do understand that Tears of the Kingdom is the most recent game, but like I wanted something more. I wanted a big huge honorarium for the whole franchise or something like that.
Yeah, I've noticed that some of the collaborations at Uniqlo are very hit or miss. Like I'm still a kind of an Overwatch fan. I've fallen off super hard from it, but
I
like
think we all have.
yeah, from 2016 to 2020, I was playing that daily. I have over 1,000 hours in the original Overwatch, and I remember looking at. I was like, oh my god, they're doing an Overwatch collab. I need to check these out. How many am I going to buy? Three, four, five? I didn't buy any because I was just like, man, those are underwhelming. So I have some of the Splatoon ones. I liked some of the Splatoon ones because they were super colorful. I have a few Street Fighter ones, which one of them was like kind of the key art from Street Fighter Five of Ryu, and that one's in contention for being my favorite. I have an M Bison one. I have a few other ones, but my favorite I think is the Jar Jar Binks one that I got in the style of the iconic Great Wave off Kanagawa painting. It's unbelievable. It's like his head in a like a wave, and his tongue is out, and it's like the strangest shirt I own, but I wear it and I get comments on it all the time. They're like, I'll just see them like staring at my chest and they'll be like, "Oh my god, that's an incredible shirt," and it's just so weird. I was like, I have to buy this. I remember taking a special trip on like a trip when I was out in LA for work one time. I was like, well, there's a Uniqlo over by the Alamo Draft House. I got to stop by there and get this shirt. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite one. They do some really great Star Wars ones. I have like I think like three or four of their Star Wars ones. They have one of like with the original design of Luke Skywalker where he just has like shredded abs and everything. Like it's a really cool shirt, and they've done some cool stuff with that. But yeah, I'm not feeling the Tears of the Kingdom one. There's like one that I might consider picking up, and it's just like the main hero pose of Link, and it's like, oh, I could probably just go to like Nintendo.com and get something similar
Yeah,
as
some of them
this.
felt like I hate to say it, but some of them had like GameStop vibes to me a little bit. Like it did feel very much like, oh, I could go buy that at a like a GameStop or a Best Buy or just like somewhere that has these plain branded shirts. And we live in an age now where there are the Yetis of the world and the fan gamers of the world where they're making these like really cool creative video game themed, like there's no lack of great video game themed merch if you want to wear video game t-shirts all the time. And
Exactly.
so just okay isn't going to cut it anymore.
Yeah, it's like when you go to like I don't know if you ever shop at Kohl's, but like if you go to there, they'll have video game shirts, but like it's literally just like a picture of Sonic the Hedgehog and the logo that says Sonic the Hedgehog. And it's like, you could probably do something a little more creative with that. I don't know about that. I mean, I know it's like not marketing to like the gamer demographic at a
No,
place like Kohl's, but
for sure.
like, yeah, it just I don't know. These didn't feel like they were as creative as I would like them to be. Also, shout out to some of their Marvel collabs that they've done because I've bought a few of those as well. But speaking of Zelda, I mentioned last week that we at Game Informer were holding a bracket style tournament and letting our community vote on the greatest video game of all time. So, first of all, Klein, what is your pick for greatest video game of all time?
I think it's Tears of the Kingdom at this point.
Wow.
If it wasn't that, if I have to give a different answer, it probably changes from day to day. But I know this is a Nintendo podcast, but The
No,
Last of
go.
Us Part Two for sure is like a pinnacle of video game storytelling and gameplay. I love that game dearly, as much as you can love such a depressing experience. But yeah, it's for me. I think it might be Tears of the Kingdom now. I think that game, as I said, the further and further away I get, the higher it goes up my ranks.
It's fantastic. And surprisingly enough, in this tournament, I think The Last of Us Part 2 was a number 2 seed. You know, we did it kind of college basketball style where it was, 1 through 16 in 4 regions. And The Last of Us Part 2, the biggest upset in the tournament was Metroid Prime taking it out in the first round.
Wow. In the first round?
15
Oh
seed
my
Metroid
goodness.
Prime taking out The Last of Us
Oh
Part
man.
2.
I mean, that's no hate to Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime is fantastic. I played that game for the first time last year
Oh,
with the
the
release of the
remaster?
remaster
So
and
good.
was like, I how was this just sitting there? This masterpiece that I've never touched was just like hidden away, but I don't know if it's better than The Last of Us. That's crazy.
I think that there's been a lot of internet backlash at The Last of Us, and that
Yeah.
has maybe colored some people's opinions on it. But we started this tournament 64 games, and just last Friday we got to our result. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time beating out The Elder Scrolls Skyrim in the championship with 52% of the vote. That's hardly the closest call. I think, God, what was it? Was it one of the Metal Gear Solid games, I think, beat out the original Pokemon game by something like 9 votes. Like, it was intense. And like the tournament got over 200,000 votes. And there were like 3 that were like really close calls. I was looking over all the results and I'm like, oh my God, it's a good thing I can look at like the individual numbers of votes on the admin panel, because like the percentages, it was just completely non discernible. Um, but yeah, go to GameInformer.com for the full results, because some of them is really interesting, like how those played out. And I think it was a great success. I think we'll come back and have people do this again with other topics, because it was really fun to watch it go. We had, I think, every Monday and Thursday we ended our rounds and then progressed it, and then eventually got down to the championship just last Friday. So how does that pick sit with you, as the community voted Ocarina of Time as the greatest game of all time?
I don't think it's crazy at all. I think that it's what can I say about Ocarina of Time that hasn't already been said? I'm trying to remember. There's a lot of great video essays about this
So
game out
many.
there, but there's like this like awesome 2 hour masterpiece of a video essay, if you can find it, just Ocarina of Time video essay on YouTube about the themes of this game and the kind of A plot and B plot, and how time and grief and trauma all play in this story together. And I think, yeah, I mean, Ocarina of Time is fantastic. Give me that remake. Just bring it.
Oh,
Just that is what I want more than anything in this world, is give me a modern remake of Ocarina of Time. Anytime I see a video of people on Twitter posting like what Ocarina of Time could look like in Unreal Engine 5, I sit there going like, oh man, like what I would give to be able to play that on my Switch.
right.
It's got to come at some point, but I want to play that game again so badly.
The internet has run with one of my interviews that I did with Eiji Aonuma and Hidemaru Fujibayashi just last December. And I made a joke because when I did the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth cover story and I was out in Tokyo at Square Enix, Yoshinori Kitase, who is the longtime director and producer of the Final Fantasy series, mentioned that while he was on the press tour for Final Fantasy 13, the US media kept asking questions about a Final Fantasy VII remake. And he came back, and I guess Tetsuya Nomura was already thinking about doing it. And so they had the conversation, and that was ultimately how they kind of got the project off the ground. Was like, hey, these people keep asking about this. I guess the demand is there. So I made that comment to Eiji Aonuma, and I was just like, like I've heard that sometimes media asking for a project can inspire a company to do a project. So are you going to make an Ocarina of Time remake?
Like
And
let's start the petition. Let's go. This is where it's starting.
and it's funny because back in 2019, I had the first interview, and people on this podcast have heard this story before. I had the first interview with Eiji Aonuma. It was about the Link's Awakening remake, and I had this first interview with him at E3 2019, and this took place about 15 minutes after Tears of the Kingdom was announced. Then as the sequel to The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, which is the name that we knew it by for so long after that point. And I asked a few questions about that. I asked questions about Link's Awakening, and then I asked him, "Is there ever a chance that we would get a Skyward Sword remake or remaster without motion controls?" And he said that sounds like it would be close to impossible. And then you fast forward 2 years, we got a Skyward Sword remaster with the option to not have motion controls. So I'm just saying, if we get an Ocarina of Time remake, I'll take credit for that as well, even though I'm sure if it's happening, it's probably already in the works. Though he laughed and he said no comment in English, which was funny because the entire interview was through an interpreter, but he said no comment in English. But Klein, that's all for the news. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be discussing Nintendo's first quarter of 2024. We will be right back. 2024 is already a quarter of the way over, and if you're an avid gamer like us, you've probably packed a whole lot of living into these first 3 months. However, not many of those big releases have come to Switch. So Klein, if I asked you for your top 3 games of 2024 so far, do you have that list on the top of your head?
I do. I will say this is incomplete because I am 50 hours into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Okay.
I do not see myself finishing this game anytime soon because I'm not playing it for work. I'm just enjoying it, and I do not want it to end. It is absolutely fantastic.
It's massive.
It is huge. I just got to Mountain Nibel. Nibel? Yes. So I'm there.
Nibel?
Yeah, I'm getting, I think, chapter 10, so I'm getting close. But I want to say, with that said, top 3 games. Number 1 is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I think this game is just immaculate. It's so special. Number 2 for me would be Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which I think is going under the radar for a lot of people. I will say it right now. This is a sentiment I've seen echoed around the internet. The best Metroidvania of all time.
Wow, that is high praise, especially in a podcast we were talking about Hollow Knight not too long ago.
I love that game. It's one of the best platforming action games I have ever played. It is so special.
I need to play more
and then
of it.
Number 3, the only game I have on my Switch in this list is Balatro, which has just taken the internet by storm. I've never played poker in my life, but I cannot get enough of this game.
Yeah, so Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is my number 1 as well so far. It's been an RPG heavy year though. So I have number 2, Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth, and number 3, Persona 3 Reload. All 3 amazing games, all 3 not on Switch. I asked this question on Twitter, and it got more than 100 responses, and I read all of them. I read through all the responses and everything. Also asked it on Threads and got, a little bit less engagement because it's Threads, but it still got decent engagement. Those ones that I mentioned that were mine were pretty common answers, as were all of yours. The most popular ones outside of my top 3 that I mentioned, which was Final Fantasy VII, Like a Dragon, and Persona 3. Helldivers 2 was a really popular one. That game's, speaking of video games taking the internet by storm, goodness gracious. Balatro, as you had mentioned. Unicorn Overlord is one that actually got quite a bit of buzz. And the recently released Dragon's Dogma 2. And, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is also a pretty commonly mentioned one as well. And of all those games listed, only Balatro, Prince of Persia, and Unicorn Overlord are available on Switch, which is, it's pretty stark difference from what we're used to with this console, right?
Yeah, it's certainly feeling like the funeral march. You can just hear it over the hill. It's coming. It's faint, but it's slowly but surely coming towards us a little bit. It really does feel like this is the last year of the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, and I mean, all the rumors seem to indicate that anyway. Like, for a while, it was like, oh, it's coming this holiday, and now it seems like the reports are saying it's coming early next year. But yeah, it does certainly feel like Nintendo is starting to wind down the Switch. But let's run down the list of what Nintendo has brought to the table this first quarter. And then at the end, we'll see how we feel about it. So I'm just going to kind of run down this list right here. So first up, in January, as you had mentioned, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Another Code Recollection, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy, and Hitman Blood Money Reprisal. So not a super stellar start to the year. But then again, January is rarely like a jam-packed month. We're just coming off like kind of the holiday hangover. But yeah, I mean, Hitman Blood Money Reprisal was actually kind of like a sleeper pick for me to be like pretty excited about. And then I was like, oh, this is definitely like an Xbox 360 launch title, because it was. And it just so happens they brought it to Switch for some reason. I was not super impressed by it. Then February, we got Tomb Raider 1 through 3 remastered, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Balatro, Comp 2 or Comp 2. I still have no idea how to pronounce that game. The one that was published by Atari and kind of heralded as a sequel to Pong. Pocket Card Jockey Ride On, Pentiment, Splatoon 3 expansion pass side order, and Penny's Big Breakaway. Oh, and also Star Wars Dark Forces remaster. I don't know if you had a chance to check that out. I have not, but I know that people.
Have not played the remaster. I was waiting for the Penny's Big Breakaway shout out because I enjoyed that game. I am a Sonic apologist and have been my entire life.
Same.
And Penny's Big Breakaway, it feels like it feels like a Dreamcast Sonic platformer with some great movement in it.
It has great movement. I mentioned this on my review and on this podcast, but like I had some real trouble with depth perception in that
Yes,
game.
yeah. The camera specifically, the way that you can't control it and it just moves on your own, and you kind of just have to let your hands go that you cannot control it. You just kind of have to blind faith sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually does follow you. The only reason I have a grudge against that game is just because it isn't Sonic Mania 2. Like
Yeah.
that's, I am so upset that Sega let that team leave the building. But that is what happened.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. We got Sonic Superstars last year, which is kind of like
Oh,
what Sonic Mania 2
don't bring up
started
Sonic
as.
Superstars.
I think Sonic Superstars is fine. It's just a far cry from Sonic Mania, which makes it feel a lot worse than it is, I think. Um, During February, though, we also got our first official look at Universal's Epic Universe, which includes Super Nintendo World as well as kind of like worlds dedicated to the Dark Universe, How to Train Your Dragon, Hogwarts. What am I missing? There's one more, right?
I'm
I don't know.
pretty sure, yeah.
Um, and then we also got a super underwhelming Pokemon Day live stream. A very, very disappointing Pokemon Day live stream, but we did get the announcement of Pokemon Legends ZA. And then also, Xbox gave us its quote business update, which announced that it was bringing some previously exclusive games to both Switch and PlayStation. Switch ultimately ended up getting Grounded and Pentiment. So that brings us to March, the final month of this first quarter. We got Unicorn Overlord, Contra Operation Galuga, Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, which is an absolute mess by all accounts that I've heard, MLB The Show 24, Princess Peach Showtime, South Park Snow Day, Open Roads, Pepper Grinder, and then we got the biggest news out of that month was the announcement of the Super Mario Brothers movie follow-up, which we had a whole episode on like what our pitches would be for that, and that's a fun one. So go back and listen to that if you would like to hear what me and my coworker Wesley LeBlanc think that we would like to see from a Mario sequel. All right, so really one of the most persistent stories that I have noticed over 2024 in relation to Nintendo has been either multi-platform games not coming to Switch or coming to Switch with technical problems, which tells me what you had mentioned before, that we are really at a point where we need this new console to launch. Like, man, like there's just, it's really like disheartening to see this kind of downfall of the Switch, isn't it?
A little bit, but it was to be expected. Like I think
Yeah.
that the first quarter of this year has been disappointing for sure. We do have some things on the horizon. I am so excited for Paper Mario Thousand Year Door.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe we might get Metroid Prime by the end of the year. That's just
That'd be
I'm
nice.
planting my flag in that. I think that'll be kind of the swan song. But I don't know if we needed this year to be a banger. The Switch has had a great, what is it, 7 years? 7 years of fantastic, basically once a month, a reason to turn on your console for an amazing experience, whether it is something as quote unquote at the time small like Celeste,
Mm-hmm.
or it's Tears of the Kingdom. Like there was so much to play on this console, and I think it's okay. There are still things coming to this console. We got, as you said, like a Nintendo published platformer in Princess Peach. We got the remake of Mario versus Donkey Kong. We're still getting things. It isn't, of course, I don't think we've had a, I don't know, like prestige title, if I'll
Mm-hmm.
call it that. Like
Like a
we have not
Mario
had.
Wonder or a Tears of the
Exactly.
Kingdom, something like
Exactly.
that.
We haven't had something crazy, but there have been a few little things. I forgot about that. I had completely blanked out that Nintendo or the Pokemon Day stream, but I was so upset at that. I want the Pokemon games, like the Game Boy games, on Switch Online
Oh,
so
so
incredibly
badly.
badly. And I thought we were going to get it there. There was a moment in the stream that I was like, it's happening. And then it didn't. And I'm sitting here going, why was I awake at 6 a.m. for this? I needed my Pokemon sleep, is what I needed. Um, but I like you say that it's been disappointing, and I agree, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I don't know if anyone was expecting this first quarter of the year to be an A plus.
I think we've just been conditioned at this point that like the Switch is kind of like banger after banger, right? Like
Yeah.
that's really a result of Nintendo consolidating its development studios, right? In terms of like it's no longer they have to choose, all right, do I want to make this game for the Wii U or the 3DS or the Wii or the DS? It's oh, I'm just going to make a game for the Nintendo system that exists, which, you know, serves both audiences. And that has been such a boom for Nintendo having, you know, basically double the content coming out for their console. So I think that's why this feels like such a disappointing start to this year. And you know, I was going to run down kind of what we have to be excited for on like the horizon, like the next 3 months as well. We can just run down this real quick. As you're listening to this, Freedom Planet 2, which is basically like a
It looks like
Sonic like.
Sonic and Mega Man X had a beautiful baby.
Yes, and it's on Sega CD. Those type of graphics.
Yeah.
I've started it. It's very fun. I want to play more of it and hopefully get a review up on GameInformer.com. We have Tales of Kenzera Zao. We have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade Wrath of the Mutants. We have another Crab's Treasure. El Shaddai Ascension of the Metatron HD remaster, which by the way I did not know we were getting a remaster of that game, especially this month. And then we have Braid Anniversary Edition. Then in May, we have Endless Ocean Luminous. We have Animal Well, which, by the way, super promising indie. Shout out Video Game Donkey. I think he is the taking over publishing for that game, which, you know, I played it at Summer Game Fest, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a banger. So I'm very excited for that. I got to play it again at PAX West this past year, and it still is holding up great. Biomutant, did not know that game was coming to Switch until I looked at our release calendar at GameInformer.com. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, long-awaited remaster, and World of Goo 2. And then fast forward to June, we have Monster Hunter Stories, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, which are, you know, both re-releases of games that came out either previously on Switch or on 3DS. Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, which is the first all-new Super Monkey Ball game in quite some time, and then Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. So, with that in mind, that lineup both in the rearview mirror and ahead of us, if you had to sum up Nintendo's first half of the year in one sentence, how would you do it?
Ooh, in one sentence, the beginning of the end is it's really what it is. It's feeling like we are about to put this thing on the boat and send it out off into the ocean, and it's done some great things for us, but it's time to go. It's like at the end of a relationship where like the other person is it's the end of summer, you're going off to college, and you know it's not going to work. It just isn't. So you gotta be happy. You gotta look back at the times you had rather than the times that you're not going to have in the future. And I think that's okay. Like I think it's fine. So yeah, I think the beginning of the end is how I would sum up this first half of the year.
What do you think is the biggest game on Switch so far this year?
So far that has released.
Yes, that has released so far.
Ooh, the biggest game on Switch.
Like if somebody was like, "Hey, I haven't played my Switch since
Yeah.
last year. What game should I pick up?"
It's funny because the first thing that came to mind, and this isn't something I would recommend to a lot of people, and not even myself, is Unicorn Overlord because people seem to be like loving that game. Um, the biggest game though, with probably the biggest like mass appeal, would it probably be Princess Peach.
Hmm. What about Balatro?
I would recommend Balatro. I don't know if it's a big game by any means, but if you want to get your life just taken away from you, the Balatro is the game for you.
There's also Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown that I know you're very high on, and the Switch version has the exclusive loading screens. So
It has. I played that on PlayStation. It has loading screens. Where
yes,
are
it
the
does.
loading screens on the Switch?
When you go from area to area, there you have a little
Really?
bit of loading. Yeah.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. I always forget the life of luxury we live. playing on PlayStation 5. Like I'm playing Final Fantasy 7, fast travel here, boom. No, like nothing.
It's unbelievable.
Click over there, nothing. And then you open up your Switch and you're like, okay, this thing sounds like it's about to take off in my hands playing whatever. There are games that do mad, like Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch is, I don't know how that game runs
Mm-mm.
at all. Like it is magic as far as I'm concerned.
We've
Yeah, I
seen
guess.
developers dude say that, like that it's magic that that game runs on the Switch, let alone like on any console. Like that, it's a marvel of engineering, according to like several developers who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, but like this year, I guess yeah, Prince of Persia I would recommend to people, but I don't know if it would. I would consider that the biggest game to
Mm.
come to the Switch.
Let's run down a report card for Nintendo so far. I'm just going to have you give me a letter grade and maybe some brief thoughts if you would like.
Okay.
For Nintendo exclusives, what grade would you hand out so far this year?
Oh
First quarter.
God. Okay, so we have Mario versus Donkey Kong. We have Princess Peach. Hmm.
There's another code, Recollection.
Another code recollection. I'm gonna
Trying to.
give it a C.
All right.
Yeah.
What
Nothing too heavy hitting, but okay. It's still a pass.
what about third party support?
I would say like if we're counting indies in that, I would
Yeah,
say like a B plus. I think that there have been some great indie games on the Switch. Pepper Grinder, Balatro. You
I didn't even
just
mention
mentioned.
Pepper Grinder, did I?
Yeah, you did. You earlier you did when you were
Okay.
listing out the games. I have yet to play that game, and I'm very excited to. Someone was describing it to me as like Echo the Dolphin meets Sonic or Mario, and that sounds right up my alley. So I would give it a B plus. I think that the third party support on the Switch for this year has been pretty good.
Mm. For single player games, what score would you give?
Single player games, I will also give a B plus.
Yeah, they've got a good lineup so far. You know, Prince of Persia, Mario versus Donkey Kong,
Unicorn
Balatro,
Overlord. I can't like I
Unicorn Overlord.
everyone I know who is playing that game is obsessed. They're like, this is the best tactics RPG I've played in years.
What about multiplayer games?
Oh, oh man. It's Splatoon, really, is what it is.
But even
And
the expansion that came out this year is single player.
is it? It's not even. It's not even multiplayer expansion. Oh, okay. Well, there's no multiplayer content at all.
I mean, maybe they added some like seasonal stuff to coincide with
Oh,
it, but you're paying for the single player roguelite style campaign.
that shows how much Splatoon I've played in my life. Not a lot.
I love Splatoon. Like I will go to bat for Splatoon, but yeah, from the multiplayer perspective, I think it was just seasonal updates that they've done so far this year.
Multiplayer on the Switch in 2024 is getting a D.
Okay. I was almost leaning NA, not
Yeah, like
applicable.
it feels like it's incomplete.
Or
Like it
yeah, the
feels like
I or
they
whatever
didn't
it
even
is.
hand anything in.
All right, and then what grade would you give Nintendo and its partners for getting you hyped for the next 3 months?
Oh, for the next 3 months, a C minus. I think that it has actually been fairly dismal this
Hmm.
past like the first 3 months. I was really looking forward to getting a direct this first 3 months, and we got that. We got a showcase, but it was not a like a mainline direct like we tend to get usually in
True.
that February slot. I remember last year I was hyped coming out of that February direct when we got Metroid Prime Remastered announced. We got Game Boy Advance games coming to Switch Online. And I dropped way too much money on things that Shadow dropped that day, including on Metroid Prime Remaster. But yeah, this year we didn't really get that. And I think the first kind of showcase like that of that quality that we're going to get is going to be June, maybe. And I think that'll only be because they talk about the Switch 2 there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, maybe the silver lining here is that the reason we're not getting anything for Switch is all the developers are making stuff for Switch 2 or whatever it ends up being called. So,
And they haven't done a great job of marketing anything as well. Like it's all of the Princess Peach drops have been it's just a random Tuesday on Twitter and here's a trailer and oh, here's a new Mario Thousand Year Door trailer. Just we're just putting it up. It seemed very weird.
yeah, we got one of those Mario Thousand Year Door trailers today as we're recording this, and I didn't even bother to mention it because it's like it's a trailer for a pretty loyal remaster from everything that we can tell. So it's like, go check out the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door trailer on Twitter, I guess, if you want to. But all right, final question of this segment, the big one. What overall grade would you give to Nintendo for its first quarter of 2023?
I think it is a C plus.
All right, I'm going with C, just a
Okay.
flat C.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's I mean, we're here on a Nintendo podcast and we want to be happy, and Nintendo usually makes us happy, but it has been just kind of like a like I want more, but I understand why we're not getting more. They could announce GameCube games for Switch Online tomorrow and all sins would be forgiven, but
or the Pokemon
it's
games.
or the Pokemon games. But it is just kind of like, ugh, okay, like and then I know that this doesn't really factor into like the news from Nintendo, but then we get rumors that Switch 2 has been potentially like delayed to March, and it's like, oh man, like the thing that was getting me through this was I'll have a new toy in in October. I'll have a new toy coming this fall. Here we go. But no, it's not happening. So we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer. But it'll
Yeah.
all be okay.
Yeah, it's just like, all right, well, at least we have these other consoles to keep us busy. But like, if
Yeah.
you are just a Nintendo owner, like, I guess now's the time to explore that backlog, because that's the good thing about the Switch is, as you had indicated earlier, like the library itself rivals that of any other console ever, I would argue. Like, just like, in 2017 alone, we got uh Breath of the Wild, we got
Odyssey.
Odyssey. We got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. We got Splatoon 2, which is very good, but now we have Splatoon 3. So, like, that's the one that you should probably play. But, like, yeah, like, we've gotten critically acclaimed entries in series like Metroid. We got Metroid Dread. We've got
Smash Brothers. We
Smash
got
Brothers
the
Ultimate.
ultimate Smash Brothers game.
Yes. Kirby's gotten a couple of games on Switch, including a couple of remasters. Like, the Switch is an unbelievable console. We've
Animal
gotten
Crossing, you could just
Animal
play
Crossing,
forever.
multiple Mario games. Like, yeah, there is no shortage of games. So that would be my recommendation. If you're looking for something new to play on the Switch, just go check out the kind of the top selling games of all time on the Switch, and go from there. And if you haven't played Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which I know the vast majority of people listening have, because it's one of the highest selling
Yeah, I
games
was
of
gonna
all
say,
time
are
at this
there
point.
Switches out there that don't have a copy of that game?
I mean, yeah, it's unbelievable how many copies that is sold. But like the DLC that they've put out that just ended last year literally doubled the number of tracks.
It's a
So
whole new
like,
Mario game.
it basically is. And so yeah, that would be my recommendation if you're looking for something to new play on your Switch. Just go back in time. Those old games, even the 7-year-old ones, are still super fun and still worth checking out. And like you had said, Klein, there are so many great indie games on the Switch. So that would be my recommendation. But Klein, we're going to take our final break of the show. And when we return, we're going to do definitive ranking and get an eShop gem of the week out of you. We will be right back. We are back, and it is time for Definitive Ranking, a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our own personal top 5 lists. Since you work for, by my estimation, the best superhero website on the internet, Klein, I am a sicko for superhero content, so I want to get your top 5 superhero video games of all time. So start at 5, count it down to 1, give me a sentence or two about each.
Okay, so starting at 5, I think that this is a underappreciated gem, and when it happened, it kind of came and went, but I'm putting it at number 5. It's Marvel Midnight Suns.
Yes.
I think that this is a fantastic, we were just talking about tactical RPGs. It is a fantastic tactical RPG from the creators of XCOM. It's, if you like the whole like hanging out with your pals vibe of Final Fantasy VII Remake or the Persona games more aptly, there's that here as well. And then it's got this great kind of deck building-esque battle system and a really awesome kind of spooky magic side of the Marvel Universe story that doesn't get explored a ton on TV or in movies. And so, yeah, I think Marvel's Midnight Suns is what I'm going to put there at number 5. Going up to number 4, I'm just going through all of them, right?
Yes, go for it.
Going up to number 4 is a game that I have never played, and this is actually, you're going to learn a little bit about me here. I love fighting games. I do not play fighting games.
Okay.
So I am a I mean I love spectating fighting games. Actually, I've recently decided I'm going to get into Tekken 8. It's going to happen, even though I have no experience with this franchise other than watching a ton of it.
By the way, another amazing game in 2024 that's not on Switch.
Yes, I that would make the Switch melt.
It would.
Um, so I'm putting at number 4 Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the
Yes.
I think definitive Marvel vs. Capcom game. I'm surprised that they have never reached this bar again. I don't know if they ever will, because I think that Marvel, if they're going to do if a prestige Marvel fighting game comes out that is of this level, I don't think it's going to be a Marvel vs. Capcom game anymore.
Mm.
I think it'll be from NetherRealm or some crazy studio. I'd love if they gave it to like the Guilty Gear Strive team, like Arc
Oh my
Systems
god.
Works would make a hell of a Marvel game. But
By the way, that is another one of my dreams. We talked about how I would love like a retro brawler starring Marvel characters. Just a dedicated Marvel fighting game from a studio that just like lives and breathes fighting games. Like you mentioned NetherRealm or like the Guilty Gear team.
my
Like,
dream is
oh
a Marvel versus DC NetherRealm fighting game.
god, that would be incredible. But like, man, like I just don't see that ever happening. Like I know we got like Marvel versus DC like in the comics back in the day, but like I just don't see it happening these days. I think like the rivalry has become too
I
great.
think if it were to happen, NetherRealm would have to be involved. Like it would have to be a WB owned studio. They would have to be the one making it. But yeah, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, it's one of the flashiest fighting games ever. It's incredibly fast. It's incredibly fun to watch. It's like watching like Street Fighter Alpha, or something like, or Street Fighter 2 Turbo Edition. Like it's just incredibly fast and the moves are cool and the art is beautiful. You popped off for that when I mentioned it. Are you a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 fan?
You cannot see it, but it is one of the arcade cabinets I have in
Oh,
my
awesome.
basement.
Awesome. What does your team look like in Marvel vs.
Oh
Capcom?
my god. I'm a weirdo when it comes to fighting games because just like with my hair, which I'm constantly changing, I get bored of doing the same thing.
Oh,
So like when people ask me like, "Oh, who's your main in Street Fighter?" I'm like, "Well, I guess Ken," but like every match when I'm playing with a friend, every single match I choose a different character. So I like to mix it up a little bit. Like Spider-Man's always kind of like, one of the mainstays. Wolverine has always been a mainstay, but I really like Venom. I think that Iron Man's fun to play as. I usually stay with the Marvel side of the fence there. Like I don't really do too much with the Capcom, but like if I do, it's going to be a Street Fighter character for sure. Like man, Hulk is fun just because like he's so huge and Juggernaut and but yeah, it's man, what about you?
as I said, I've never played it, but
That's right.
I love watching it. I love watching Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I think that this game, fighting game wise, has the coolest idle animations of any video game ever made. It is just like Spider-Man just like bouncing up and down as he's waiting to like get in on a fight. I love it. It's so cool. Moving to my number 3, I'm looking at my list right now and I'm noting that I think, did Midnight Suns ever come to Switch? I think there are no Switch games. There's no Nintendo games on here.
It was announced for Switch and then they canceled it I think a year after the
That's what I
original game
thought.
came out.
So my number 3 is a PlayStation exclusive, and that is Infamous 2.
Ooh.
In an age before we got these kids these days, they don't know. They are playing their Spider-Mans and their Batman games, and they're like, oh my gosh, we live in a world where licensed spot or superhero games are fantastic. We didn't always live in that world. And Infamous 2 came out, and they were original superhero stories, and they were awesome. They were incredible. I picked Infamous 2 because I think the power set is a lot cooler in there. I love the location of this like fictional take on New Orleans. We don't get enough video games in that area of North America. I think that's just
Mm-mm.
a very cool place, and like the bayou to like hang out and um set a comic book story. And I love Cole McGrath. I love the electric powers and stuff like that. I think it's a really fun game, and bring it back. I know we got Second Son, but like make Infamous 3.
I liked Second Son as well. Like I know it gets a lot of hate, but I thought it was fun for what it
Moving
was.
around that world is awesome. And as somebody who lives in the Pacific Northwest, like seeing Seattle rendered like that on screen, we did eventually get it again in The Last of Us Part 2, and it's very similar. But like seeing those locations for the first time playing through a game was very cool. And just moving around that world was awesome. But I did pick Infamous 2. It's fun, like grinding on the rails in that game and stuff.
It is.
Number 2, and this might be controversial, is Batman Arkham City.
Okay.
It is my favorite of the Batman Arkham trilogy. Batman is my favorite superhero. I think that just the mythology of Batman is so cool, and I I think that the story specifically of Arkham City is very special. Just like spoiler alert, game came out a long time ago, but the death of Joker and like that whole leading into that coming out of Arkham Asylum is very, very cool. I think that this game is one of the like most fun open worlds to traverse. It's one of the first open world games I can remember just spending time in for no reason other than to spend time in it. Like I
Hmm.
had done everything else, and I'm like, I am just going to swing around and glide around and punch thugs in the mouth because it just feels so good to do that here. And I'm gonna go and on Christmas go find Calendar Man hidden away, and I'm going to like. There's just so many cool moments and hidden little Easter eggs in that game. Like that, it truly does feel like a love letter to the Batman mythology, like all of the Arkham games do. I think Arkham Knight gets a bad rap. I actually really like Arkham Knight.
I do too. I'm a defender of that one as well.
I will even say I like the Bat Tank. Come at me. I think that
Most of it,
like
yes.
I think that moving around in that game is a lot of fun, and it seems crazy to me that that game is almost a decade old and looks the way that it does. Just stunning. But I believe Arkham City is the best of the three.
By the way, Arkham City is on Switch.
It is.
There's the Arkham trilogy that they put out on Switch. Arkham
Oh,
Asylum and Arkham
you're
City run
right.
fine. Do not try to play Arkham Knight on
Yes,
Switch.
I remember. Okay, I do remember this coming out. I remember the Digital Foundry videos. Some of the,
Yes.
if you want a rabbit hole to fall down, those are some great, great tech breakdowns.
Yes.
And my number one, I was like going back and forth because it's like, is it this one or is it that one? I think I'm going to say Marvel Spider-Man 2.
All right.
It was either that or Marvel Spider-Man 1. I love Spider-Man. Like growing up for me, it was Spider-Man and Batman. The rest of the superheroes didn't matter. I was actually a DC kid growing up, but and other than Spider-Man until the MCU came out. But to see that character in the same way I saw Batman rendered in the way that he was in the Arkham trilogy, to see Spider-Man rendered so faithfully in the Marvel Spider-Man games was something so special. I think I prefer the story of Spider-Man 1. I think that that is like,
Hmm.
I like my Spider-Man stories small. The multiverse stuff and the space stuff, it can be done very well. I love Into the Spider-Verse. I love those movies, but I like just Peter Parker being a guy and dealing with girlfriend problems and trying to save New York. But I feel like the actual act of playing Spider-Man 2 is so much better than Spider-Man 1. I love the wings.
The wings are game
When they
changers.
announced those wings, I was like, what? I don't why would I swinging feel so good? Why would I ever glide across Manhattan? And then you do it for the first time and you're like, "Oh, I know why."
Because
It
it's even
just
better.
because it feels so good. It baffles me that there's fast travel in any of these games, just because it does feel so good to
Hmm.
move around. Spider-Man 1 was my therapy game for a long time. This Spider-Man 2 is now my therapy game where I will just, if I got nothing to do, I'll pop on the PS5, just swing or glide or just move around this world a little bit, because it does feel so good. And I think that the story in Spider-Man 2 is still really good. They do a good job of taking those kind of more fantastical elements like symbiote and the symbiote literally like eating all of Manhattan. But they keep it grounded to Peter, which is something that can get away from a Spider-Man story very quickly. In my review over on the direct.com of the game, I think I said that it takes elements of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 and all these projects that had these just things that people did not like. And you can almost see Insomniac Games actively going, oh, actually, we're going to do that, but better. And they do. They nail like 90% of it. I think that Spider-Man 2 is an immaculate experience. And I think it's the best superhero game of all time.
Well said. We actually have a decent amount of over. Actually, wait. Yeah, we have 3 games overlapping out of the 5. I'm going to go number 5, Marvel Snap. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. I just think it's a really fun card battler. I love keeping up with the meta of that. I I buy the battle pass every single time just because I love getting the latest and greatest and being able to upgrade my cards and build like a custom deck, like experimenting with different things. Like I've created some really creative things that I've never seen anybody else do. So like I am having a blast with that still to this day. So that's my number 5. Number 4, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for all the reasons we already talked about. Number 3, I'm going to go Injustice 2.
Ooh, nice. That is one of my blind spots. I need to get to Injustice 2,
The story
but
modes
I
are
haven't.
so good. I mean, NetherRealm is that's the master of story modes in fighting games. The Mortal Kombat story modes are all amazing. Injustice and Injustice 2 story modes are so much fun. And like I think that they have difficulty settings. So if you just care about playing through the story and like seeing this fun like multiverse story that features like evil versions of Superman and Flash and everything, just fire that up and put it on easy mode and enjoy the story because they do such a fantastic job. And yeah, that's my number 3. Number 2, I had to have a representative. I didn't want to like have because if we're being honest, the top 5 superhero video games of all time are all Batman and Spider-Man games from the past, 2 decades. But I just chose a representative from each one. So number 2, I'm going Batman Arkham City, and number 1, I'm going Marvel Spider-Man 2. So we aligned perfectly on the top 2, which is surprising because I think that a lot of people would say that the first Spider-Man is better than Spider-Man 2, and a lot of people would say that Arkham Asylum is actually the definitive Arkham game. But I agreed with all the points that you made. I think that the Sinister Six storyline of the first Spider-Man game was a little bit better than the symbiote and Craven storyline of Spider-Man 2, but I still had an absolute blast. And like I mentioned before you joined the show, like gameplay is king when I'm like taking a game and like kind of criticizing or critiquing or reviewing it. And I can't think of a game that just feels better going around a world than Marvel Spider-Man 2. It's just unbelievable. And then the combat has improvements as well over the first one. Best superhero game of all time, Marvel Spider-Man 2. So that's our lists. And that brings us to the final segment of the show, Klein. eShop Gem of the Week. Chance to shout out a game on the Switch that you think maybe deserves a little bit more shine. So, what is your eShop Gem of the Week?
I've literally never heard anyone else talk about this game. It was sent to me in a press email back in the fall, and it quickly became one of my most played games of 2023, and that is Backpack Hero.
Mm.
This is a game from Jaspel Studios. As far as I know, I don't really know what else they have done. Not a ton. I will caveat all of this by saying I don't think that this game runs very well on the Switch. It does chug in places. There's a lot going on, even though it's got this cutesy pixel art package. But what this game is essentially is a run-based roguelike deck builder mixed with the inventory system of Resident Evil. So it's that kind of Tetris, put equipment in the right places to make your bag the most efficient space wise. But everything you put in your bag, as you go through the runs, you collect boots and helmets and swords and shields and all sorts of equipment. Everything you put in your bag kind of act like a card in a deck, but where you place them in the bag will change the effects of a lot of them. So say you have a glove. For every space in the bag that you have to the right of that glove, it'll give you that much more armor. Or say you have a helmet that has like, it's a poisoned helmet. So for every weapon it's touching, you'll add poison damage to every attack you use with that equipment. And then you go through the dungeons, and when you die or when you have finished your run, it turns into this kind of city builder, very light Animal Crossing elements, where you're this little mouse and you're trying to save your family, and you go back to the city and you build new buildings like a weapon blueprint store, where now you can spend the resources you gained in the dungeon and put it towards researching new weapons to find for your next run. And I love a roguelike that kind of builds upon itself, and you're essentially just getting more and more powerful with every run that you do because you're finding more things, you're researching, you're doing this and this. That's why I love Rogue Legacy and Dead Cells and Hades and stuff like that. And this is a game that doesn't get talked about a lot. As I said, have never heard anyone else talk about it, but if you like those kind of games, it will scratch that itch for you. As somebody who's spent hundreds of hours in Slay the Spire, in Rogue Legacy, in Dead Cells, like this is up there for me as one of those. And it's just mixed with this, it's this creative little twist. I've never seen a game use the inventory system like that. Taking a kind of mind-bending inventory system from Resident Evil and putting it and making it a key mechanic in your deck builder.
So while you were talking and you mentioned like you don't know what else they've done, I was trying to find what else they've done, and I was unsuccessful. So this might be their debut title. I mean, Steam did not have anything. They had a couple of bundles, but they were just like, oh, you can buy Backpack Hero and Slay the Spire together, or you can buy Backpack Hero and another inventory management game. And yeah, so this might be their debut title, but you know, it has kind of like that SNES, almost like the top down view almost looks like A Link to the Past in terms of like its visuals and everything. But I love the kind of charming 16-bit art style that they used, and you know, it's only $20, so it's you know, it seems like if this sounds like it's up your alley, it's not the biggest risk, but like it, as you had mentioned, something that I found when you said that this was like the game you wanted to talk about, I did find people saying that it does not run well on Switch. So maybe check it out on other platforms, or if Switch is all you have, then I mean, I haven't checked to see if
It
they've patched it
only
or anything.
really the only real issue is it chugs in the city space when you actually
Okay.
go to the town and are researching things. When you're in dungeons and stuff, it's fine. Like, you don't worry about it. It's such a good game, and I think this is to the credit of the game that I can look past a jittery frame rate. I can look past it taking a few seconds to load on Enter a Store. But like it is a lot of fun.
And if that sounds up your alley, like I said, it's $20 and it came to Switch last November. Klein, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I hope it's not the last.
Yeah, you'll be back for sure. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com or hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea. You can also join the Game Informer community Discord, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel, even just for 1 month. And then a reminder that we have a standalone subscription plan at Game Informer now. You can sign up if you live in the United States and get 10 issues shipped straight to your door for less than $20 before tax. Klein, tell everyone where they can find you online.
You can keep up with me everywhere. I'll make it simple. At the Kleinfelt on Twitter. You can find everything there, whether it's Reckless Rebellion, Controller Club, my work over at thedirect.com. That's TheKleinFelt. Twitter, Instagram, Threads. Come say hello.
And then also the Reckless Rebellion podcast and Controller Club. Go check those out wherever you're listening to this show. That is our episode for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.